What is going on, peeps? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. How is everybody doing today? What's going on, Kevin, Reefcan, Hassan, Skookum Reefer, Jamie, Hot Ashes? How are you guys doing today? Today, I wanted to talk about kind of live foods and phytoplankton and show you guys how to actually culture phytoplankton. That is one thing I actually get asked quite a bit, so I figure it would be a good topic for today. Now, one of my future upcoming projects is going to be feeding or trying to spawn rockflower anemones. So whether or not phytoplankton will play a big role into that, it's a very good question. But either way, I'm going to get all my cultures rolling again. So I figured I'd take you guys along for the ride. What's going on, Victor, Philip, Lisa? Lisa number two, how are you guys? How are you up in Canada? I'm over in Vancouver in Washington. It's funny that there's the same city in multiple places. Uh, Things are doing well. It's actually quite sunny, nice out today. Cleaning the house and the tanks, always good. Dual purpose, got to clean it all. So yeah, first question I guess is why would you want to dose phytoplankton to your tank? Well, so if you think about it, phytoplankton is one of the base foods of the ocean. So there's actually a couple different types of plankton. There's, I guess, called bioplankton. There's zooplankton, and there's phytoplankton. Now, phytoplankton is the one that most of us culture. It is what we feed our tank. Now, phytoplankton will feed lots of different things in your tank. Like one of them would be the zooplankton, for instance. So zooplankton is like your pods, your copepods, your amphipods, and all the little creatures. Hot ashes, everyone hit that thumbs up. Thank you guys, always appreciate it. So one of the big benefits of dosing phytoplankton to your tank is to increase your pod population. More pods is more little creatures eating detritus, helping keep your sandbag cleaner, giving you free fish food, all kinds of really good benefits to that. So it's lots of benefits of dosing phytoplankton. And nowadays, most of our skimmers, our tanks, our filtration is so hardcore that we almost strip our water too clean. So one of the things I often wonder is, can you overfilter tank? And I bet a lot of us do these days. So by doing certain things like adding phytoplankton and other stuff back into your tank, you're kind of adding those minerals back into it. So what's going on, Kyle? Reef Can? Easy reefing? Welcome, guys. So by dosing phytoplankton to the tank, the pods is one thing. Another big one is certain corals will take advantage of it. Not all of them, but a lot of the filter feeding corals, like I know a lot of the NPS corals, like argonian, stuff like clams, they'll definitely take a lot of it. If you buy yourself a nice, beautiful new clam, and it's a really big clam, like it can survive just on photosynthesis. But if you got the little babies and stuff, like they rely heavily on phytoplankton because they do a ton of filter feeding, especially when they just have a tiny mantle and they're little babies. What's going on, Reef Loco, Virginia? Hello from Houston. Welcome back from Canada. So there is a ton of different corals and different creatures in your tank that will take advantage of it. So I do think there's some benefit. Also, if you want to do something like culture your own zooplankton, your own pods, tiger pods, all that type of stuff, feeding them phytoplankton is one of their main food sources. So you can feed your phyto to your pods, your fish, your corals, whatever else, eat the pods, and then they're in turn getting all those nutrients. Now, you can potentially even have phytoplankton culturing itself inside of your tank if you have the right nutrients in the water, right? So a couple different aspects and things to look at it. Now I have a room my son plan on doing this. Nice. So now one of the biggest things when you're culturing phytoplankton is it's susceptible to crashing from contaminants. If you don't keep everything super duper sterile, you'll likely have a crash at some point. It may go for a month or two and then crash on you. If you keep everything super sterile, then it's going to last longer and longer and longer. So one of the ways to mitigate this is one, sterilize everything whenever you set up a new culture or whenever you're you know, handling and dealing with stuff to try and keep your whole area nice and clean and sterile. Now, the other mentality is, yeah, it's going to crash eventually. So why not just have a contingency plan? So one thing that I do is I always, have more than one culture on the go. So if one crashes, I have a backup culture and I could use that to start another second culture. So there's a couple of different ways you can deal with it, right? Krieger's Reef, welcome. Waiting for my new coral food to get here. Nice. UV. I don't know if UV kills Fido. It depends on the flow through, but it might. One of the most common ways is to do, for most people, you don't need a ton of phytoplankton unless you're culturing pods and other stuff. So you could just do in like water bottles, like 1 liter bottles or 2 liter bottles. I tend to use more like 1 gallon glass jugs. Now for them, so this was one of my old cultures. It's still a bit dirty. We got to get this one cleaned up. Use a dishwasher, sanitize, works well. Yeah, that could work. What I normally use is rubbing alcohol. So this stuff is 70%, up to 90%, 50%. You can buy a bunch of the stuff like dollar stores and different places. So someone's asking, so reef and recan, how do you know when it crashes? So as you add your phytoplankton to the water, it's slowly going to get darker and darker and darker. And then it might, once it crashes, it basically hits a critical mass. So if you don't take part of your phytoplankton out of the water, you don't split your culture, it gets too dense, it will crash. And usually it will turn into like a more of a tea color. It will start going lighter and more liquidy color. Yeah, so brown and cloudy. That's a good way of looking at it. So it basically loses dark green. Now there is different types of phytoplankton. Some of them are that yellowy color, some are the tea, some are the super dark green. Ideally, to start a culture, you would want to you get a specific strain of phytoplankton. I've always used a blend. I've used this for a lot of my cultures, but Reef Nutrition sells PhytoFeast, and it is a blend of a bunch of different phytoplanktons. Now, there's a chance it's almost Russian roulette which one you're going to end up with because one of the strains is eventually going to take over. Usually it's Nanocropolis, which is one of the easier ones to culture. It's pretty hardy, so that's usually the strain that lives. So I've used this multiple times, so definitely recommend Reef Nutrition. They make some awesome stuff. And I have used that before to start cultures. They don't really say it or advertise it, but the black cap version is live phytoplankton. As long as it's live, you're good. If you do buy this stuff, make sure you keep it in the fridge. It basically slows down its metabolism and keeps some kind of live viable cells. Would hydrogen peroxide be okay for a cleaner sanitizer? Yep, I've used that as well in the past. I usually give it a bit of a rinse with RO afterwards. Rubbing alcohol, usually it evaporates a little quicker. That's why I usually tend to use this one, but either in theory should work. Nano works great and tiny. Yep. So to clean this, one thing, so rubbing alcohol, this one is, what is it, 70%? I've used, 50%, whatever, the random ones. But at the drugstore, I picked this up at the dollar store yesterday for what, $3, so it's not very expensive to get it. So generally, I will take this, get some paper towel or whatever you're using, the rubbing alcohol on, and just give all of your containers, everything you're using, a really good wipe down. And this is going to kill any bits of potential bacteria or anything that might potentially be inside of or on top of your container. I like to do inside and outside, just clean it up and make sure we get everything. Now, one thing that not everyone considers, also make sure you always do your lids as well, because the lids is where a lot of your bubbles, your evaporation, all stuff can get onto you. You don't want anything falling inside of your tank, so really get everything a really good sterilization. Again, for containers, you can use pretty much anything. Now, to actually bubble inside the tank, what I always do is use airline connected to some hard airline. This is 3/16 tubing. I did find some on Amazon and linked it in the description, pretty much all the stuff. So if you guys do want to attempt any of this stuff, you can find where everything's located. Do you sterilize your culture water? I do not. I've heard lots of people that do, and I've heard them do it a few different ways. One is by adding actually a bit of bleach to the water, then using dechlorinator. I've also heard of people taking their salt water and microwaving it, and they let it cool and do that. I've never bothered doing that. I also have had crashers culture after a couple months, and it's probably because I don't sterilize my water. So you definitely can, possibly should, but I haven't. This works. Dosing reef chili is like using flake food versus using live food. Reef chili is BRS's brand. It's a big mix of all different kinds of foods. It's basically, I believe, from my understanding, they'll go take something like reefroids and all these different brands and basically mix them together. That's why it's called chili, right? It's all these different foods into one little container and they feed it. So you're getting a bunch of variety. So it's a good way to do it without you having to buy 10 different brands yourself. Okay, so we got this guy nice and sterilized. This is our little hard tubing. This is what we're going to poke inside. Now on this, your water bottle or your container, whatever you're using, drill a hole in the lid, and this is basically for the hard airline to get through. You don't want your hole too big because you don't want any contaminants getting in ideally, right? But you do want a little bit just because you're pushing air in, so it needs a little bit of air to escape. So you don't want it like super duper tight, a little bit of play in it. And then from there, super simple way is just adding our water to our culture. And I'm going to move my keyboard just in case. So this is already some pre-mixed salt water, and I'm spilling on my counter. Can never be quite too easy, can it? I'm a battery pack, everything. Yeah. So with this, for salinity, it's fairly forgiving. I generally use around 1.019, and that seems to have been working pretty well for me. I believe it can be a bit lower, a bit higher. That's kind of somewhere in the middle where it gives you a bit of buffer room, because as things bubble, eventually it's going to evaporate a bit, and as it evaporates, then it's obviously going to raise your salinity. So you could top it off with RODI, but as long as it's not a huge opening in your culture, it's more or less going to work itself out and not be a huge swing on you in that week. All right, water cleaned up. So we've got our water. If you want to be extra hardcore, you can microwave it. You could do something to sterilize it. Generally don't bother that part. And then you need a phytoplankton source. So for this, we're going to use Phyto from Reef Nutrition. Very important, black cap. Black cap is live, white cap is not. So the white cap is a non-viable source, black cap is viable. Now, they don't really advertise for this, but I've done it, it works, so it's a good solution. If you go to, is it Florida Aquaparts? One of those, anyways, they do sell kits. I think it's Florida Aquafarms, I believe it's called. And I've used it in the past. It's a little disc, you add water to it, you let it soak overnight, and then it's just like a pure certain strain of Fido. Now, sometimes certain Fido strains have benefits over other strains. And if you want to dose those ones, then that's, I don't know, a couple different ways to look at it. It's more if you're breeding fish and certain things might have a different advantage or not. Do you have to acclimate the Fido because of salinity in the culture? No, I've never bothered acclimating it. That's hasn't really been an issue. Now, how much you add is you want it to be a semi kind of dark green color. And as your culture grows, it's going to get darker and darker and darker. That's not bad. I could probably culture off of this. If it's too light, your culture might kind of fail on you and not fully work. And if it's a bit darker, you got a higher level of success of it kind of fully going. Can you use live phytoplankton from the LFS? Yep, as long as it's live, that's the big thing. So it needs to be live, so something to consider. Now we have our Fido. Now we have to give it light. So you could wrap the LED strips around it. I have some little like 18-inch grow light little T5 strips. I have two of those that I use to just shine on my glass containers. In the past, I've tried wrapping with lights. Either one's going to work. You basically just need a daylight source. Could be a CFL. Could be basically whatever you want. You need a light source. And I light mine for probably around that 14, 15 hours a day. 14, 16. Can't remember what it is offhand. Now, the amount of light you give it also affects how fast it is. So if I'm going out of town and I don't want to worry about my cultures crashing, I'll maybe reduce my light way down so they're not growing as fast and we'll slow it down. Now, we got our Fido. We also need to feed it in order for it to grow. So we use something called F2 media. Now this is kind of F2 algae. The ones I'm using is from Fritz Pro, and there's a part A and part B. So two different fertilizers. You mix them together, and that's basically your food for the phytoplankton. Can I put on the windowsill that gets lots of light in the day? I haven't tried it, but I don't see why not. It probably would work. So I'd give that a try. Now for these ones, they basically say 1 mil of each or 30 mils of each per 60 gallons. So cut that in half. Then you got 1 mil or 30 mils for 60 gallons. So that's half a mil per gallon. So basically half a mil of each of these into here. And then after that, let me go find a little syringe in the stash of stuff. Doo-doo-doo. All right, there we go. A little old test kit syringe. So with this, there's a few different brands. Florida Aquaforms F2 I've used, and I've also used the Fritz brand. And both have worked pretty well. So I'm going to do half a mil of part A. That's part B, I guess. And another half a mil of part A. All right, so there is basically our culture's food. Now, I generally only feed it at first, and then I'll let it go until I split the culture. So after, I'm going to say probably, depending on how much light you have in your light period, it can be anywhere from about 7, 10 days. Somewhere in that range is generally at the point where it will get super dark. Now, if you look at this, it is super duper dark green. So as this gets really, really dark, you know your culture is getting ready to its kind of apex. And that's the point where you want to split it before it crashes on you. So basically what you do when it's time to split it, I would dump half of this out into a second container. And usually that's just like a couple bottles in my fridge, and then I'll use that to feed the tank. So in here, so for instance, here's one of my kind of culture bottles. I split it, fill a couple bottles, and then every few days, whenever I think of it, I'll just go glug, glug, and dump a couple of glugs in my tank. And that helps feed the tank, helps feed the Gargonians and all the filter feeders and all that stuff in my tank. So good way to do it. Big thing is if you do culture it and you're not using it all, make sure you keep it in the fridge. And it's also a good idea to give it a shake every couple of days because that will kind of keep all the cells suspended. And if you don't, they will eventually fall down and settle and kind of crush each other. That's kind of why it's important to keep them suspended. Thanks, Lisa. If you guys are enjoying this, learn something, smash some like buttons. And if you want some real cool reefing shirts, I got some new ones I made. Okay, and now for the airlines, this is the 3/16 hardline, and I hook it up to just some regular airline, and then we bubble it inside of here. So the whole point of it is to keep it agitated, let stuff bubble up. Now, if you're doing just a small culture, little A pump, these are the ones I've used for kind of bubbling to the tank. They're not super aggressive, but if you just have like a single water bottle or something, this could work. Now, in these bigger 1 gallon ones, I generally use something a bit bigger. I tend to go with the Fusion air pumps. They're decently inexpensive on Amazon. Again, links below. But they're fairly quiet, and I hate noisy things, so I tend to use these guys quite a bit. Now, inside of here, once it's actually bubbling, you want it basically like something around that. You want it to agitate the water. You want to keep things moving inside of it. I want a shirt, but it's too small. I'm a bigger. Hey, there's extra large shirts as well. It actually uses a print on demand place, and they just print it and they mail it out. And I've basically realized that it's cheaper for me to do that than it would because the shipping can is overly priced for some reason. Someone else shipped me a shirt. You know, it's $15 just to ship it, not even counting getting it made. So it's actually cheaper to get it print on demand and shipped directly than me doing it. So cheaper in the end. So what about temperature? So I don't do anything for temperature. I don't heat it. I basically just go off room temperature. I have mine in my little furnace room, so it's decently warm in there. It's not crazy warm. If you had a really cool area, you might want to do it, but generally just like room temperature in the house is sufficient. XXL. Yeah, it should work. Yeah, Rogue has one of the shirts. I think you might even have this one, Rogue. So that's the base logistics of it. So then we'll have light on it and light it. Could be anywhere from 10 to 16 hours a day. I do give it a rest time. I don't 100% know if you need to, but I do. So yeah, big thing is making sure you get proper F2 fertilizer. And 4 Aquafarms ones I've used with success, and same with the Fritz too. So this guy is now, once I'm done after the stream, I'm going to go put this guy up with my other culture, and it works pretty well. 1 mil per 5 gallons and moderately stocked tank. Okay, so so Nick was saying 1 mil per 5 gallons. I have honestly never measured. I walk up to the tank, go glug, glug, that's it. Rocking it right now. All right, Rogue. Nice, matching shirts. I like it. 78 degrees be too hot. No, I think that'd be fine. It might even culture a little bit faster if you have a little more heat. Now, if you guys are trying to culture pods and other stuff, it is really good idea to get good at culturing phytoplankton first because that's going to help feed them. Have you tried using tank water? I have not used tank water. Now, in theory, if you have nitrates, you will likely have nitrates and phosphates in your tank water, which could, in theory, help feed the culture. Now, the only thing is being tank water, it depends. It might crash over time just because there would be other contaminants. So like it might work for a batch or two that might crash on you and you might have to restart it. But but you could potentially try it. I have heard of people doing that way. Any noticeable increase in nitrates and phosphates with live phyto? So if two ways to look at it. Uh, this will absorb as phyto grows. Like lights in your tank will, in theory, let some phyto grow within your tank. And as it grows, it's going to absorb the nitrates and phosphates within your system. So there was actually a big thread I read a while ago on ReefDudes, people saying they could actually reduce nitrates and phosphates by dosing phyto. Now, on the flip side of it, if there is probably certain nitrates and phosphates, what's in this guaranteed. So there is nitrogen and there is phosphate, 6% and 2%. So there is some in here. Now, it's that food source is feeding, say, the copepods, and then the copepods are being eaten by the fish. If all of a sudden your pods all died or something, they would release those minerals back up. Just like if your chaeto died, it absorbs nitrates and phosphates, could potentially release it back into your tank. Yeah, so you're asking what does it feed? Okay, so Nick answered that one. Pods, clams, corals, etc. Yeah, so there's lots of filter feeding corals. Like I know Gargonians, I know lots of MPS corals really appreciate it. Clams, especially baby clams, small ones really appreciate it. It's going to boost the pod population in your tank. What is the signs to look for if your culture crashes? Okay, so normally if my culture is getting darker and darker and darker every day, and say I leave it for 2 weeks and forget about it and it starts to crash, usually you'll see it light up. It'll start to look like a really light tea or water. Basically, it goes darker, darker, and it starts going light really quickly. And that's kind of when you know, okay, it probably crashed and it's time to start a new one. Now, because of that, it's either good to have some extra stuff lying around so you can restart it. And then again, for this, I'm using Fido Feast. Since the ideal way, since the blend of Fido, it's ideally should start with just a pure strain. But I don't know, works for me. It's easy to get. Good stuff. I like reaching tissue, so why not? So that's been working. So that's the basic thing about it crashing. Now, that's the other type of thing to say is if you have multiple cultures, so this is way overkill amount for most people. Don't need a 1 gallon. What I used to use is those little water bottles that were clear. They were smart water or whatever, like little 1 liter bottles. Like those are actually really good size. Now, the other thing that I've seen happen is sometimes you'll get it like a really dark ambery green color or like an emerald green. And that's actually could be from getting infected, almost like a cyano in a way. That's another thing. If it gets really weird, kind of glowing emerald color, that's usually means cyano, something infected it. It's all bad. Start a new one. Now, if you dump it out, always resanitize, reuse rubbing alcohol, make sure everything is 100% sterile before you restart your new culture. Also, feed your culture every 7 days. Yeah, so if you don't split your culture and it's not getting dark enough, then okay, maybe you need to add a little more fertilizer to it. It's a little more F2 media. You can also try adding a bit more fertilizer. Sometimes you're just starving it out. That is a little true. Yeah, so if you haven't gave it enough food source, it could be dying off. And then adding more food sources could sometimes bring it back. So good point on that one. Now, also, if you want to grow it quicker, sometimes you can add more food and it will, be ready in 7 days instead of 12 days or whatever it actually works out to. So a couple different ways you can look at it. But yeah, for the bubble rate, it's usually just, a decently aggressive bubbles. You just want it to make sure it keeps cycling all those phytoplankton back to the bottom, back up again. Canadian Reefers Unite. So if you guys have any specific questions on it, let me know. But that is the quick and dirty of it all. Multiple cultures is wise, just in case one crashes on you if you don't have a backup source for phytoplankton. Going to be tried this weekend. Excellent. So this, if I don't culture my own pods, so yeah, so there is benefits. If you are breeding fish or breeding stuff, that is when most people culture them. Not everyone cultures it just for the reef tank. Most of the time when people culture it is because they're, trying to grow clownfish or something else. And the culture is to help feed the microfauna, which in turn feeds your little baby fish and little creatures with little tiny mouths, right? They can eat all the zooplankton or rotifers and all that type of stuff. Will the jar have to be glass or plastic? I've used both and both have worked. So I don't think either of that makes a big difference. I used to just use plastic bottles and I'm using glass in this one now. So I don't think they overly care. I've never used feed Fido something. It is not necessary. You do not have to feed your tank phytoplankton. Your tank will be perfectly fine without it. However, there are certain corals that appreciate it and will be healthier. They'll have better colors. They'll grow more with feeding Fido. And that would be something like, yeah, I need it for rotifers. Okay, so rotifers is super popular food to feed if you're breeding fish. Now it can also be fed corals. Like rotifers are tiny; they can culture. Actually, another cool thing I picked up. I haven't tried it yet, but I got one of the Reef Nutrition's compact culture systems. So it's basically for culturing rotifers. So I'm gonna experiment and actually try this with copepods. I don't know if it's gonna work 100%, but I'm gonna try it for fun, see what happens. That'll be another upcoming experiment to try out. So yeah, for rotifers, good thing to feed your tank. Like even corals can eat them. They're super tiny, like little specks, baby anything. If you have certain fish like mandarins in your tank, that's a really good reason to culture pods. What are rotifers? Rotifers are like copepods, but tinier. They're super tiny. They're like a little pinhead, like super tiny little specks. So super tiny base microfauna, zooplankton type of creature. So it is another is okay for if you have a mandarin in your tank. Now, if you have a big tank, you have a good refugium, like you're probably producing enough pods out of there. If, for instance, I have my little all-in-one tank, I have a mandarin in my 20-gallon, which he could pretty easily clean out all the pods in there. So part of the reasons I cultures is so I can supplement my own tanks on a regular basis. I do buy them once in a while, but it can also get expensive if you're buying them constantly. So it's good to have a culture of your own at the same time. Easy Reef was just saying, so lights on, so 16 hours lights on, 8 hours light off. That's a great schedule to use. Yeah, so used to feed clownfish fry, used to feed corals. Clams is another big one. If you buy a clam, your Maxima clam, whatever it is, beautiful, you spend a fortune on this little clam. If it is 3 inches or larger, it's going to get most of its nutrition from the light. If it's under that, if it's like, an inch, inch and a half, you got a wicked deal on it, that guy is going to require a lot of food to grow up and be healthy and not fade away. And that's where something like feeding Fido is going to be like a huge food source for him. So you don't need to feed it to the tank, but a good chunk of it really depends on what's in your tank. I definitely don't think there's any harm in doing it. I don't. Some people say, can you dose too much? Unless you're doing excessive amounts, it's not something I'd worry about. I also get asked a lot, how often or how much do I feed it? I don't really have a set thing. I literally just, whatever I think about, I'll walk up, like glug glug, and then dump it in. So there isn't any rhyme or reason to my feeding. One day I might set up on a doser, but because I keep it in the fridge, it's usually just walk up, blip, blip, color it in. So definitely benefits. But now the biggest advantage to most people is it's going to increase your pod population. So pods will eat the phytoplankton, and then your fish, your creatures are going to eat the pods, right? So you're basically providing a natural source of food. Now, the phytoplankton is full of nutrients. If you buy some food and they say to like gut load it, you're basically feeding it something like phytoplankton to put those nutrients into the belly of your pods or your mysis or whatever it is. And then as your fish eat them, they're gaining indirectly getting that phytoplankton nutrition. So it's getting their sea veggies for your little creatures. Scrape the film algae off the glass that feeds the clam. Probably eats that too. They'll filter feed anything. So that's pretty good. So yeah, lots of different benefits around it, guys. If you do have any more questions on it, let me know. Basically, all the stuff I use, I try to find links for. So that may or may not help you. If you're watching this afterwards and you got questions, let me know in the description. If you enjoyed it, smash the like button. I'm going to keep it fairly short today because I got company coming over soon. But I had to start a new culture anyway, so I'd figure I'd share a little love and show you guys how I do it. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, guys. I see it as pods eating Fido and then detritus. Exactly, 100%. So pods will eat detritus. They'll help keep your sand bled. They'll help go through your rock and eat all the little bits of detritus and stuff that's in there. And so they help clean your tank, and it's also a form of free fish food. So it's win-win. What else is good ones? Pipefish is another one. There's mandarins. There's lots of little pod-eating creatures that will appreciate you. So if you have those guys in your tank, maybe consider it. If you have MPS, you have filter feeding corals, consider it. Sponges, all that type of stuff. That is a way to increase our numbers. Yep, exactly. So 100% will bump up the population's numbers in your tank. 91 watching, 30 likes. What? Smash that like button, guys. Because it's good. It's good. I'll be trying this in the near future. Thanks for sharing. No problem. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna call it today. Super quick live stream. Hopefully, you guys learned something. It's pretty easy projects, so why not give it a try? Doesn't cost much to do either, so it's pretty easy. Most people have an air pump laying around already, so 90% of people need to find it. Could be a pop bottle, could be whatever you want. Pick up some hard air lime, go pick up some Fido Feast or a different form of live Fido, and try it. It's pretty easy to do. If I buy pods in a bottle, just dump them in. Yep, you can definitely do that. My pipefish and clam, hammer, nano, every little bit helps. Exactly. All right, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Smash the like button. You want anything? Check out the links below. Want sweet shirts? reefdudes.com/shop. And I will see you guys in the next live stream.